In Nunavut, food comes from two places, the store and the land, and neither are easy. Welcome back to the Arctic Edge. When food becomes harder to get and harder to afford, it shows up in places you might not expect, like a classroom. Ryan Baker knows this all too well. Ryan works with the Breakfast Club of Canada, supporting school food programs across the country.
One school in particular was really proud of, since implementing their nutrition program, that they saw a significant decrease in the number of students that were either late for school or didn't come to school at all. And they said it's because they started serving a hot breakfast almost every school day of the year. So students knew if they got to school on time, there was a hot breakfast waiting for them. That same school also reported that since the implementation of their program, they've now seen a significant decrease in the number of behavioral issues that they've seen in classes, and they tie that directly to the startup of their school breakfast program.
And when the food isn't there, the impact shows up quickly. Judith Berry sees that every day.
How does hunger play into how a child learns?
A child can't learn, can't even concentrate or interact positively on an empty stomach. When you're focused on trying to remove that pain, you can't learn. You're not even available to learn. You're not available to others. You're not even hearing the teachings, right? You're not there. So food is making all the difference because we're seeing children bloom. We're seeing their full potential. We're seeing children be children. They're becoming nice, kind, and they want to help. They engage with their peers, with their learnings as well. So it makes a world of difference.
In Nunavut, this is something families deal with far more often than anywhere else in Canada. Food costs more. It's harder to get, not because the need is different, but because everything it takes to get that food here is more complicated. But that doesn't mean it has to stay this way. There are real challenges. Many of them can change. And there are people and organizations working to make that happen. But right now, the pressure on families is still growing.
Do you feel that food insecurity is easing, or do you feel it is intensifying right now?
I think that the continued rise in grocery prices continues to hit families really hard. Since COVID, we've seen about a 40% increase in the attendance at school breakfast programs that we support. And that's for a lot of reasons. But notably is the continued increase in food costs is putting so much downward pressure on families that, again, there might be food available in the house, but the food starts to become a little bit more scarce, or the food becomes a little bit less high quality.
Canadians have definitely felt grocery prices rise nationwide, but it's different in Nunavut. Here, families are paying about 1.5 times. Let me say that again. 1.5 times more for the same groceries as people in the South. And the same is true for school breakfast programs.
Usually, in the South, a cost of a breakfast in a school setting is about $2 to $3 per child per day. And we asked a school principal about their cost and what would be needed to ideally provide a very robust quality program at their school. And according to their calculation, they were talking about a $12 to $14 per child per day.
$2 in the South, 12 to 14 in Nunavut. For the same breakfast, for the same kid, same need, very different price. So why? It's easy to think the answer is simple. These communities are far away. Food has to travel. And of course, that costs more. But But that's only part of the story. Duane Wilson works with 32 community-owned cooperatives across the Arctic. He spent his career looking at how food actually gets to the north. And he'll tell you, it's not simple.
It is no one thing. And because it's no one thing, I think that's why it's harder for policymakers and others to find a solution. Construction costs, repairs and maintenance. The minimum wage in Nunavut's gone up over 23% in the last 2 years. Insurance costs, the communities of the Arctic from an insurance perspective are considered unprotected because they don't have fire hydrants and staffed fire departments. So that drives up insurance costs in a way that, isn't comparable to a southern business. And then, of course, it still comes down to the question of scale. A typical grocery store in the South might do $1 million in volume a week at lower utility costs, at lower wage costs, without a year's worth of shelf-stable goods in a warehouse in the back room. They don't have the same investment in inventory because they're getting 6 or 7 deliveries a week. So all of these things compound.
Economy of scale. That's when buying more makes things cheaper. In the north, that doesn't always work the same way. Wages, insurance, storage, it all costs more. So the price keeps going up. And the way food gets here is very different from the south.
It's a big challenge, trying to make sure we know how many students are going to be at that school next year, making sure that we have that food that's shelf stable and highly nutritious that communities actually are looking for. Because we do run all the food products that we would send up to them. We run it past the schools to make sure it's what they're looking for. Because again, shipping food is one thing, but if it's not food that the school wants to serve or can serve, it's not going to do any good. And we want to make sure that we're providing the support that's required by the school or that's wanted by the school. So it is months of planning for us to make sure that our food distribution center has that food available, that schools know what's coming, that schools have approved that food, and it's on the barge in time. And as communities are aware, just because everything, the barge season is typically from May to August, sometimes August isn't a great time. Sometimes the ice comes in early and there's one shot. And if we miss that shot, that food won't make it up to those communities. We've got our entire food distribution center during the month of May focused on getting that barge stocked up.
One shot, one window.
The school staff was coming to the port to get the food orders with snowmobiles. It's one thing to get the orders through the barge, but then we have to ensure that the food is getting to the school.
When the barge can't carry it, it has to come by air. Air freight is expensive and getting more so. And this is where it does get trickier. Duane Wilson says there's no one simple way to get food to the north.
You're trying to balance different modes of transportation, sea lift versus air freight, because at the end of the day, the co-ops are owned by their members. Members are consumers in the community. So they're always striving to give them, the best value. And there's many, many, many factors also complicated by increasingly more and more goods are coming with best before dates.
There is a federal program meant to help with exactly this. It's called Nutrition North Canada. And on paper, it makes sense. A subsidy on food flown into remote communities. The problem is what's happened to it over time.
The Nutrition North Canada program is an important program to help improve the cost of food, but it's not scaled for inflation. And it's now 15 years old. There's been 1 or 2 ad hoc adjustments to subsidy rates over the years. But those aside, for 15 years now, the marginal benefit of that program has been steadily eroding. When the NNC stays stagnant and cargo rates go up, all other things being equal, those extra costs need to get passed on to the consumer for the business to remain viable. So that lack of scaling to inflation basically means that in the cost of inflation is being borne 100% by the consumer.
And that brings Duane to something he says is the most important and least discussed factor in food insecurity in the North. It's not the distance. It's not even the subsidy. It's income.
A lot of research has shown that there's a very high correlation between household income and food insecurity. And that's not research that's necessarily unique to the Arctic. That applies no matter where. So I think that it's obviously a lot more evident and a lot more acute in the Arctic because we've got a much larger proportion of the population that is living in a low-income situation. So it shows a lot more in the Arctic because there's a lot more people that are in that situation that while the food is there, they just don't have the means to buy it. So I think that's a very important facet for policy and legislators to consider.
The food is there. People just can't afford it. That is a policy problem, which means there should be policy solutions. So what would actually make a difference? Duane suggests 3 things.
What I would suggest is that people actually have a great deal of power if they choose to exercise it. Because I think that making one key decision to support the community-owned business that they own and direct and can help set priorities with respect to pricing or service or patronage dividends is one ready and easy change that the residents of the communities of Canada's Arctic could make to help to take a greater degree of control, influence, and have insight into what is driving the economics of their local business.
Make sure the subsidy keeps up with rising costs. Scale it with inflation. Address income, because that is at the heart of it. And listen to the businesses and people who see the gaps and know what actually works.
I think one other thing is we talked about income and how income is a barrier to food security. And because cooperatives are using the cooperative business model and returning surpluses to their member owners, that becomes an important example of how economic leakage is not happening. Co-ops in the last 2 years combined, I don't have the exact tally off the top of my head, but I suspect it's in the neighborhood of $36 million that they've returned to members in the community, in the communities cumulatively. So that is an important source of income that those community residents can use to meet their dietary or other needs.
$36 million returned directly to community members. Money staying in the community, circulating. This is the goal. Alex Cook of ArchTech, who we spoke with in our housing episode, sees the same idea from the construction side.
Companies like my own, we are focusing heavily, again, through the ArchTech program, the Applied Residential Construction Training for New Communities program, on developing local capacity so that a lot of that money can recirculate in the community. What we should be trying to do is create a circular economy where we're able to invest in our communities such that that dollar gets spent around a few different stores before it makes its way out. This model, I think it thrives on being Inuit owned and Inuit operated, and that the benefits really do need to remain in the community at least for a little bit longer so that we can create those circular economies where we exist.
If that can ultimately translate into better housing situations, if better housing translates into better educational attendance and educational achievement, well then that's maybe the first of a chain of dominoes that can make large and lasting improvements to benefit communities, so that communities can be stronger and more self-sufficient.
But alongside all of this, the programs, the supply chains, the economics, There is another food system, not a new one and not imported, one that's always been here. Albert Netzer knows it well. He's the co-CEO of Arctic Fresh Group in Rankin Inlet.
Country food is a big topic, I think, across the board because it's our main source of diet. It's seal, it's beluga, narwhal, polar bear, walrus, That's part of our heritage in the Inuit community. There are a few people, let's just say just enough people, that when they're harvesting, they harvest more than enough for themselves, but also give away to the community members for the people. Like you'll see on Facebook, wherever the community is, free for pickup. I got this makdak, or I got caribou meat, or fish outside my house on a kamutik. There's enough people out there that are good-hearted and are giving in nature, that they're giving food to the people that can't. The joy of giving.
Co-ops are stepping in, finding ways to keep that tradition going and making it easier for people to get out on the land.
We very much value country food from a nutrition and a kind of culturally appropriate perspective. So oftentimes what co-ops are doing is kind of around supporting that. So for example, the investments that they make in having ammunition in inventory so that they're enabling hunters that way. The amount of parts for snow machines and ATVs that they keep in inventory at the community level to reduce downtime, to again reduce another barrier to hunting and harvesting. And for several years now, we've also had a hunter support program where we're granting money per community to a hunter to help, again, reduce the barriers. And it's not really prescriptive about what it's for. It's a grant. So if for that particular hunter it's fuel, then great, they can knock that obstacle down. If it's supplies, food for on the land, again, there's no limitations on how they use it, because we really want it to be something that is not prescriptive, and that it's helping to knock down whatever barrier that particular hunter has in order to access the land to harvest and provide for his or her family and community more broadly.
Community feeding community in every form that takes. The spirit of seeing a need and doing something about it runs deep here. And Arctic Fresh Group was built on exactly that.
Rhoda and Merlin Ricinos are from Igloolik. They are the founders, the people that started the Arctic Fresh. Rhoda was a teacher back then, and the story goes that she was having some problem with one kid, and then later on found out that the young kid was, disruptive more because of hunger, and like when we're hungry, like we can't focus, we can't do any work, but I'm hungry, let's stop everything and let's go eat right now. Some of us, we have that luxury. And Rhoda's heart melted and went, we have to do more. We got to do more than just teach, provide food for the young and make sure that they're fed to learn properly, or to have focus on learning and not focus on trying to get the next meal. So Merlin and Rhoda started food ordering. They tell it like they started in their house on a coffee table and started ordering. At first it was junk food, selling pops and chips, and then reusing the money to help programs, and they kept scaling up.
A coffee table. That's where it all started, because someone saw a child struggling and decided to do something about it. Breakfast Club of Canada saw the same thing and made the same choice to step in to make sure kids have what they need before they even sit down to learn.
Talk a little bit about the partnerships like you have. Agnico is helping with this as well.
We've been collaborating with Agnico Eagle since 2008, but before the 3-year partnership that took place in 2023, we were supporting only 5 breakfast programs in Nunavut, but we had more than 15 schools that were on our wait list. So those schools were applying and requesting Breakfast Clubs of Canada's support and services, but we couldn't onboard them due to the lack of resources and funding. So we were really happy to join forces with Agnico Eagle, because within the past 3 years, we've done miracles thanks to that partnership. And we are now present supporting 25 schools across Nunavut, and that's greatly, mainly due to the great partnership with Agnico Eagle.
Community, industry, government, all of them have a role to play, because this isn't just about food. It's about people, support that keeps up, income people can live on, businesses that give back, an investment that stays in the community. That is how things start to change.
This is a societal issue. When we think about household food insecurity, it's not a family problem. It's a problem of society that is to be fixed and that can be fixed. It's a matter of willingness, and each and everyone can make a difference and can do a step.
There's so many people already in the communities across the north, and notably in Nunavut, between teachers and youth workers and volunteers and principals, or just people in community who want to make sure that the future of those communities is secure, and that the children in those communities today grow up to be the community leaders of tomorrow.
Community leaders of tomorrow, but it all starts today with something most of us take for granted: food. It shapes everything, whether a child can focus, learn, and whether they can see a future for themselves. And when they have what they need, they grow, they lead, they build what comes next. Join us next time for our final episode of Season 2, where everything comes together. And we look at what happens when real investment meets real opportunity in a place called Hope Bay. I'm Hannah Thibedeau. Thank you for joining us on the Arctic Edge.